The 2020 presidential race has reinvigorated concerns over voting access, methods, and equity. We spoke to MassVOTE's Deputy Director, Tegan George, to learn how organizations like MassVOTE are working towards voting equity in Massachusetts.
Really, we've transitioned a lot to phone banking, and we work with our community partners and volunteers and stuff in the community to make calls. So interestingly, our response rates on the phone banks are much higher than they normally are, I think, because more folks are at home. We've also been doing a lot of text banking, which is a new technology to us, reaching out to people via text. I personally really like that because, that way if someone's busy, they can look at it later, that type of thing. But the one of the challenges that we've had is that, a lot of the folks in the communities that we care about maybe don't have broadband or don't have, that like sort of like wireless access, that type of thing. So in these 2 weeks leading up to the election, we have launched a ground program of sorts. We have folks in full PPE doing contact-free drop-offs of, we designed some door hangers as well as materials prior to the voter registration deadline, which is this Saturday, October 24th, and of course the election coming up. So I think that's one way that we're reaching out to folks that maybe we haven't gotten to speak with in this time.
But even with the hard work of voting equity organizations, for some, learning about early voting has required some searching. I spoke to Roxbury resident Terry Stanley about her experience so far and what brought her to City Hall. How did you first hear about early voting this
I
year?
went online, and look, it took me a while to find it.
For Stanley, who arrived early, directions to the polling location were unclear, and even after being directed by a center worker, the makeshift doorway seemed less than official. Still, Stanley sounded confident about her choice to vote early and in person. Why is it so important for you to vote early this year? Is it about scheduling? It's about convenience?
It's about scheduling, and I want to make sure that I get my vote in because on November the 3rd, I think it's going to be really crazy. And I don't want to be waiting in line a long time, so I'd rather wait in line now instead of wait in line then.
We asked George if the new expansions on states' voting programs are sufficient, and if enough had been done to educate people about these options.
Normally, you have to have a reason to vote absentee. Like Massachusetts is one of the states that
Right.
that you have to be, ill or homebound or in the military or something like that. And so we were thrilled when they passed these, COVID related provisions for people to be able to vote by mail. And we have been really encouraging people to do so just because that is the most secure way to vote. Fraud is virtually non-existent. And, folks have the option to drop it in the mail and the postage is paid, which is really neat, or they can walk it over. Like my partner and I walked ours over to, we live in Brookline, to Brookline Town Hall and just dropped it right there and it was accepted right away. But there are folks that for various reasons prefer to vote in person, and we've been encouraging them to vote early. Just I think really what the city and the elections department and the surrounding communities are really focused on is avoiding those huge lines on election day.
Finally, we asked if messages like mass votes were effective during the pandemic. Had people's enthusiasm for civic participation persisted through months of quarantine, shutdown, and reopening?
I think that people are just extremely tuned in, extremely interested. We've had an influx of people wanting to volunteer. There were some concerns about poll workers a few months ago, thinking that the polls were going to be understaffed because a lot poll workers are traditionally older folks that maybe are higher risk for coronavirus. And so we launched a training program and a recruitment program for poll workers, and actually were so inundated with interest that we've ended up, trying to figure out how to transition people to other roles, working, in election protection or phone banking or stuff like that, because we've actually found that people are just, really activated, really energized, really excited to, and I think there's often this type of interest around presidential contests. I think that this year is, I would say, more so, but I think that our challenge as an organization moving past this is that, there's so much work to be done for equality and civil rights and social justice across broad swaths of issues. So I think channeling that interest and making it not a moment, but something that we build movement and build strategy from.
Early voting in Massachusetts will end Friday, October 30th. On weekdays, locations are limited, so go online and search early voting dates and locations to find a convenient voting center. On November 3rd, Election Day, polling places will open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Photo ID is not required, but mask wearing is likely to be enforced.